iQOO first started as a gaming-focused sub-brand of Vivo, and over the years, yes, it's still all about performance, but the iQOO 15 is very much a very competitive all-round flagship that offers everything you could imagine for a starting price of around $800. But here's the thing, that's based on the Indian price, and what phone cost exactly the same in India? The OnePlus 15. So does the iQOO 15 have what it takes to sway your purchase? Well, for starters, box contents are stacked. You of course get the phone, but there's also a case, a charging cable, and a charging block. And that's not just any charger, it's the official 100 watt charging block because this phone supports 100 watt fast wired charging speeds. It also now supports wireless charging, which sits at 40 watts. And to top it off, its battery capacity has increased all the way up to 7,000 mAh, which is a massive increase from last year. The design also seems to have grown up. It's similar to last year's, but this time the LED ring wrapping around the camera island sits below the camera bezel, so it's not as in your face and doesn't look strange if you disable it like it did last year. That's good news for those who aren't exactly fans of RGB lighting. The phone comes in its signature Legend White or Alpha Black colorways, but now there's a color shifting gray option which is unfortunately limited to certain markets. I have it in Alpha Black, which is the only one that has a fiberglass backplate, and yes, it certainly shows fingerprint smudges. It has a nice matte finish, but it's more like a space gray than a black. It is now completely flat though, and so are the matte finished aluminum side rails, which are actually black. This matches the now completely flat display, which has very small bezels. There's a full screen always on display which can be permanently enabled, and under the screen sits a new 3D ultrasonic fingerprint sensor, which just needs a tap to unlock. It's very accurate and extremely fast. There's no word on front glass protection, but it still has an IP68 and IP69 dust and water certification. All these specs so far are great, but honestly, it feels like all recent Android flagships offer the same specs. All of them, recently at least, have been offering fast wired and wireless charging, 7,000 plus mAh batteries, flat screens with tiny bezels, and ultrasonic fingerprint sensors, where it's getting to a point now that you could just point and choose any recent Android flagship and be happy. So why would you pick this? The main reason for me would be its display. It's still a 10-bit screen with the same QHD resolution. Most other recent flagships have dropped screen res, by the way. Slightly lower 2160Hz PWM dimming, the same 144Hz LTPO refresh rate, and the same 360Hz touch sampling rate. But now its instant touch sampling rate has jumped up to 3200Hz. It's now slightly larger at 6.85 inches, and it's the first phone to use Samsung's new M14 LED OLED panel for better clarity, much better color accuracy, better eye protection, and most importantly, it now reaches 6,000 nits of peak brightness. It gets ridiculously bright and also minimizes motion blur and ghosting, which is a big plus for gamers. And speaking of gamers, this phone packs in insane performance hardware. It's of course powered by the latest and greatest Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 CPU, but it's backed by iQOO's new supercomputing chip Q3, which handles things like ray tracing, upscaling, frame interpolation, and AI for image quality, taking a lot of the load off the Qualcomm chipset. There's also a new cooling system which has a 14% larger vapor chamber area, as well as up to 1 terabyte of UFS 4.1 storage and up to 16 gigs of faster LPDDR5X Ultra RAM. Only the 1 terabyte model comes with LPDDR5X Ultra Pro RAM though. With all that power under the hood, of course benchmark scores are in line with pretty much all other recent flagships. We still have Ultra Game Mode for things like Monster Mode and bypass charging, but unfortunately there's still no info panel for real-time FPS, so you'll have to use a third-party FPS counter. Please add this next time, iQOO. Thankfully, there is super resolution to enhance detail and super frame rate to interpolate frame rates in 60 FPS locked games like Genshin Impact for a smoother 120 FPS experience, and it sits close to an average 120 FPS most of the time. Unfortunately, if you enable ray tracing, it disables super res and FPS. Unfortunately, not all games support features like super frame rate, so games like Wuthering Waves are stuck at 60. The good news is that it's sat at a stable 60 FPS most of the time with maxed out graphical settings. Bright Memory Infinite is a console port, so it's a very demanding game to play. Thankfully, the game has a 120 FPS option, but unfortunately the phone gets pretty hot and seems to throttle performance. It still runs well, but it only averages around 100 FPS with all graphical settings cranked to the max. Keep in mind though that I was running this game at its native QHD resolution. Delta Force is another console port, and I can't get enough of this game at the moment. It looks stunning and this phone can run the game in 120 FPS mode at HD. Unlike with some other flagships which drop the graphics preset down to standard when set to 120 FPS mode. It sticks to 120 the entire time. I just hope they add support for 144 FPS soon, as there is a grayed out option for it in the game settings menu. Luckily, Call of Duty Mobile is one of the few games that actually utilizes this phone's 144Hz refresh rate, and it sits close to 144 FPS most of the time. But only because if you enable Ultra FPS mode within the game, the graphics preset drops to medium and can't be changed. It runs the game extremely well, but even with that new cooling system, this phone gets very hot in the hand. On the plus side, the iQOO 15 does offer a dual-axis vibration motor, so haptics are very good, and while there are dual stereo speakers and they are on a flagship level, they aren't as symmetrical as other phones I've tested. The bottom speaker certainly gets louder.
Contact with enemy! Missile on standby.
There's still a USB 3.2 Type-C port as well as an IR blaster, but this time we now get a triple ambient light sensor, and we now finally get eSIM support, which was missing last time out. And another very big deal is that iQOO are now promising 5 years of major Android updates up from last year's 4, and 7 years of security patches up from last year's 5. And now finally, gone are the days of FunTouch OS. Global Origin OS 6 is here, and it's skinned over Android 16 out the box. It's global, so of course there's Google Discover, Circle to Search, and Gemini. There's loads of ways to customize your device, and the design has been polished. There's a new Origin Smooth engine for deep level fluency. They guarantee a 5-year smooth experience. Animations have been improved. And now there's Origin Island, which is something we've seen other Android phones also adopt recently. You also get all your typical AI features, and now you can actually share files between it and an iPhone. You can also integrate your phone with your Mac, or even take control of a Mac or a Windows PC. Okay, now let's get to the cameras, and even though this phone is not marketed as a camera-centric device, it certainly has a flagship camera setup. The selfie camera uses the same 32 megapixel sensor, but now has a wider aperture and field of view. But the only real difference here is that the telephoto camera is now a periscope sensor. It's still 50 megapixels, but the actual sensor is now larger, has better OIS, and can reach further at 3 times optical zoom. The main camera also has better OIS, but the main and ultra-wide use the exact same 50 megapixel sensors as last year. So while ultra-wide shots do come out better due to slightly better post-processing, there's still nothing to write home about. The main camera takes flagship leading photos, but they come out looking identical to last year. There's still a bunch of different color profiles, but I've stuck to natural as it's the most color accurate. And honestly, color science definitely seems to have improved this year. The telephoto camera is definitely a step up though. It packs in a lot more detail at a further optical focal length, white balance has improved by quite a bit, and depth of field seems to have improved too. Unfortunately, there's no way to use the telephoto sensor in macro mode, even when you select the 3 times option. It always reverts to the main sensor. Does that even matter though? I mean, look at this photo. There's also a 6 times lossless zoom option, and it honestly retains all detail. Super telephoto enhancement kicks in from 10 times, and it does a pretty good job too. But things start to fall off at 20 times, and max 100 times zoom doesn't exactly look impressive. At least you can still kind of make out what's going on here though. And keep in mind that last year the max zoom level was 30 times, so this is definitely an improvement. Portrait shots come out looking a lot better than last time, especially when it comes to that telephoto sensor. But just like we've seen from Vivo phones in the past, there is only an option for 3.7 times zoom when in portrait mode, even though the optical zoom is 3 times. The wider field of view from the selfie is a welcomed upgrade, photos come out looking very good, and edge detection is almost perfect in portrait mode. But at night my face looks a bit too polished, even with beauty mode disabled, and edge detection isn't exactly the best. Using the rear main and periscope in portrait mode at night produces some decent photos. I'm just not sure the periscope was actually used here. And this time there is no way to disable telephoto switching in the camera settings menu. The ultra-wide camera is a proper letdown at night. Light noise handling is terrible, and so is near focus and exposure. It also crops in when taking a pixel binned photo. Native main photos at night come out looking pretty good aside from some light noise, and when binned down it almost looks like the time of day has changed. Either way, I'm quite pleased with how main shots come out at night. I took a few native megapixel shots at night with the periscope and they look alright. But the main reason I did this is because if there isn't enough light when taking a bin down photo, the phone always reverts to the main camera for a more exposed shot, which doesn't look very good. Things look a lot better when there is more light in the scene though, and the phone sticks to the periscope. It's just not quite the upgrade I was hoping for. 6 times lossless zoom isn't exactly lossless at night, and 10 times isn't the best either. Further focal length zooms aren't perfect, but honestly 50 times and 100 times zoom shots come out looking better than I was expecting at night. Ultra-wide video is rather stable, but there's a lot to be desired in terms of detail. At least we can still shoot ultra-wide video at 4K 60 FPS though. Main video can also be shot at 4K 60, and it seems to be quite a bit more stable than last year, especially since it's been really windy here recently. The telephoto can pan video surprisingly well, without much stutter, and it's really smooth thanks to improved OIS. Detail is significantly better than last year, and while last year we could record 4K 30 FPS video with the telephoto, this year there's an option for 4K 60, which is always nice to see. Unfortunately, there is still no 4K slow motion video option, but 1080p resolution still looks decent. The max FPS when shooting slow-mo is 240 though, and it's limited to just the main camera. 8K video is also fixed to the main camera, just like last year. Portrait video is still stuck at 1080p, but it's not really needed thanks to the phone's large sensor sizes, especially when looking at the periscope video, which offers fantastic natural depth and detail even without a portrait mode. And just like last year, selfie portrait video is also capped at 1080p resolution and 30 frames per second. Alright, it is extremely bright right now, and there's also a lot of wind, so I'm going to enable something called vocal enhancement. There we go. So it should reduce the ambient noise around me, and we can also record 4K 60 FPS selfie video on the iQOO 15. So let me know your thoughts on the video quality, as well as of course the microphone performance. Selfie video is quite grainy at night, but it comes out looking decent when there's a good enough light source. Video of me using the rear sensors at night looks okay, and yes, the periscope was used here. Ultra-wide video at night is below average, and I was really hoping for better night footage when using the main sensor. It's still very grainy and light noise is still handled poorly. I did manage to get the periscope to work at night when recording video, and while footage is also grainy, I was actually surprised by the level of detail in such a dark situation. To be honest, this phone takes flagship leading photos and videos during the day. If night photography is what you're after, then this probably isn't the phone for you. But once you realize that photography is just an added bonus for this kind of phone, then everything starts to make sense. In terms of upgrades from last year's model, you're looking at a more grown-up design, a more premium display with much higher brightness levels, a larger battery, finely wireless charging, a new chipset, a new dedicated gaming chipset, an upgraded cooling system, faster RAM, improved haptic feedback, better software with more future updates, finally eSIM support, and an improved telephoto camera. I guess all those upgrades do justify a price hike, but in an ocean of flagship Android smartphones that are honestly all just as good, I can't seem to find one standout reason that would put the iQOO 15 above the rest. Okay, maybe that display. That display is everything. As always, this is TechNick, and I'll catch you in the next one.